So first of all, Dan and Millie, thank you for the opportunity to speak. I appreciate it. I'm going to hopefully help people learn how to deliver projects on time and on budget. This is me. Normally, I would talk about the company ICS and Boston UX and what we do and how we do it, and I'll say that a little bit. But before I get there, I want to say I'm you. So I was a founder. I started a company up when I was in my late 20s. I won't tell you how many years ago that was, but today I have over 100 people, maybe closer to 150 people working for me. We build devices, things with touch screens, everything from the Coke Freestyle machine, which is the one that lets you type, caffeine-free Diet Coke, to air traffic control systems. We do lots and lots of things in lots and lots of markets. I'm sure you've seen our things, but haven't known it. Our focus is how we build, design, and deliver products that users love. And I try to keep this center in all of our internal meetings and all of our customer meetings of how do you design, build, and deliver products that users will love. And if you keep that foremost in your mind, or whatever your value proposition is, it really helps. I do want to say that I have also know Jack Derby. He's a great speaker, and I encourage you to listen to him. He's a character. You'll get a lot out of the thing next in 2 weeks. And also that in general, as an entrepreneur starting up, there's a little difference between building a successful product and building a successful company. And so when we've done this now for lots and lots of companies and lots of businesses, everyone likes to put their big brands up as the ones that they work with. But the meat and potatoes are a lot of small companies that we do business with. It isn't only the big companies. I will say that when Dan reached out to me and said, how do you build a project on time and on budget? I said, no problem. I give this talk all the time. And I go through the places where projects often go wrong. And then I said, how much time do I have to talk about? And he said, 15 minutes. I'm like, I couldn't go through it all in 15 hours. So going through where projects go wrong is hard. And anyone that says they have the solution is misrepresenting themselves. There is no one place things go wrong and one way anyone can make things successful. Apple can't make sure everything comes out on time, and Microsoft, the big guys, no one can do it. There's always problems. But what you're trying to do is figure out how you're going to mitigate those problems and how you're going to get through so you can be successful in spite of the problems. And if I were to summarize what I tell people in this presentation, I don't think it would be actionable for you, because it's all about how you plan for the unknowns and how you staff in such a way that you can prepare to give yourself more flexibility. But when you're a small company, it's you and your buddy. The pre-planning isn't going to help so much. What's going to help is your ability to react as you go, and your ability of how you sequence things. But I do want to, I took this one slide out of my presentation, and I think what tends to kill projects is the unknown. And the unknown, just because you don't know about it doesn't mean you can't plan for it. And I characterize unknown things in a bunch of ways. There's, across one axis, is the unknowns about what you're trying to build. What is the market can actually buy? And then there's different unknowns about how you're going to actually do it. What and why. And then the combination of those things are going to kill you. But if you could start with, am I building the right thing? Am I sure I'm building the right thing? So I'm speaking, Steve Cummings, to you now. Like, how do you know that you're building the right thing here? And then once you know that you're building the right thing, how am I going to build it? What are the pieces that I'm missing in my technology, in my understanding of how to do it? And of course, there's always the business basics, just like, because a lot of failure can happen just from unforced errors. Like I said, I could spend a week on those things, and I'm not gonna do that right now. What I'm gonna focus on instead is user experience. What user experience is, why it's important, and how it's going to solve the problems that I suspect are the ones that are really the ones that are going to stop you. So the user experience, I should have started by the way, asking everybody, how many people are doing technology problems. So if this was a live event, I would ask you to raise your hands, but you can't raise your hands. So maybe you can put in the chat, are you working on a technology problem or a service or product or something that's therapeutic? Like I have no idea. And the second thing I'm sort of interested in is, how big is this company that you're building? Is it one person, two people, 20 people? Like, if you give us an idea in the chat of what those things are, I think it gives me a good idea of what to speak to. But in the meantime, I'm talking to Steve, who's got the one company I know about. But the user experience is everything the customer sees about your product or service. How do they know who you are? How do they interact with you? And if the feature isn't in that interface, it's not in the product. So building lots and lots of technology for technology's sake doesn't help. Doesn't matter what's in that database. It's only, can the user use it? I had a meeting, a post-COVID sales meeting, by the way, with a guy who was building a control package for electric vehicles. This is a system that would show all the vehicles the customer owns, and like for pizza delivery or something like that. And they start by saying, well, we got all this data in our database, and we just want to give the user the ability to query the database. And I'm thinking to myself, how do you even know the customer's problem is in your data? You have it till you start with, like, what is the guy that runs delivering 1,000 pizzas a night? Like, what does he really want to know? Does he care about your battery life, or does he care about, on-time delivery? And how do you get to those things? And the second part of it is, if you can't figure out how to use that feature, it might as well not be in the product. Like, I noticed when I went on to that chatting networking software we were just on before, I sign in, it tests my audio, and the first thing it does is it plays a video that was muted and I couldn't figure out how to listen to. So there's a whole description of what the product was and how to use it. I couldn't figure it out. Most people think that UX is simply about making the product look pretty. And I'm going to try to take that away. I should have asked in my chat, how many people have even heard of the phrase user experience? But what you're really trying to do is you're trying to make the product simple to use for your user. And when it's done right, you may never even notice that it was done. I mean, we pride ourselves in making things just simple to the deceptively simple, just making it deceptively simple. And the thing, when you make it deceptively simple, everyone thinks, oh, that's the obvious way to do it. But it sometimes takes a lot of work to boil it down to what you want to know and what you want to do at that right time. The reason you want to do this is it makes your product more user-friendly. User-friendly gives you more customer loyalty, competitive advantage, and it drives your support costs down. So speaking of support costs, I'm old enough to remember when saying, read the manual was an appropriate response to someone who couldn't use your product. And in fact, there were support people who would make up these acronyms because they thought the users were just dumb and didn't know how to use the product, and it wasn't their fault. And this is like the sign that you got things wrong. If you're blaming your customer for not being smart enough to use your product, like the alarm bells should be ringing that you've done something wrong. It should be, your product should be easily usable by your target customer. If someone that's not your target customer buys it, whole different question, but it should be usable by your target. Doing this is not rocket science, but it does require thought and process. We start by talking to people, understanding what they want, coming up with a plan, and then going through developing and designing and testing. But the thing I'd really pull out here is this thing they call information architecture. Information architecture is just a fancy word for saying organization. How do you organize what things go together so that you can then you can simplify things down to the point where it works. So this was an example of one application and all the steps that someone would have to do in order to make the thing work. And then by rearranging windows, which you don't see here, we moved it from whatever this is, 6 or 7 different clicks and steps down to 3. And that's the type of thing that you're trying to do. So this is they were on one window, they had to go to another and back and forth. And instead now we added a context information on the window to make it simpler. Another example, this is an open source ventilator that we built during COVID. Whole thing started in about May and is shipping or is going to manufacturing any day now. We're submitting an FDA emergency use authorization. So what I'm trying to show here is you don't have to develop the software to test it with customers. You can just use a pencil, give people ideas of what the thing might look like and how it works. Once you have that, you color it in. This is also not software. This is done in Illustrator, just giving people an idea of how it works and what it looks like. It's another one, same application, like this is what you have to do in order to make this application work. And these are the buttons you push. And in weeks, with thousands of dollars, you can make huge amounts of progress that would take you months and hundreds of thousands of dollars if you were actually writing this thing in code. If you wanted to write this thing in code and agile your way through it, it's much more expensive. And that the taking your time to think about how the user would plan this and go through your application is just gold. Like because in addition to the planning, Steve, I'm talking to you again, you bring this to your customer in your sales meetings. Would you like it like this? How would you make it different? And you engage your customer in the design process rather than spending your time writing PHP code, right? That you're going to be able to engage the person at the business level. Well, what if it did this? What if it did this? What would be more valuable to you if I did this or that? And you can get not just your product honed in, but you can start getting your customers engaged and working with you and enthusiastic. When you have a meeting with a client and 3 days later you show them some drawings and say, well, this is what we were thinking. What were you thinking? Boy, you really can pull people into a pre-sales very quickly. Recap that is a little bit is that each user type is going to be different. We want different things, but for each one you can develop these user stories, and from these user stories you're going to be able to create these workflows of what people want to do when, and that will then lead you to this information architecture, which then leads you to a feature list. So then the trick is that when you make your minimum viable product, I don't know if people are following me here, but when you make your minimum viable product, you sort it by these user stories. Like either you're going to get an entire user story in, or you're going to pull the entire user story out. There's no point in doing 3 of the 5 features that are needed for a user story. So a user story might be, you know, I can share a document in a secure way from my phone, or some thing that a user can do with your product, and that you have all these user stories for these users, and you're gonna focus on those things. The hard decisions that the entrepreneur has to make are between, do I want the second user story for the first user, or the first user story for the second user? Like, that's going to be very hard to decide. Do I want, you know, do I want the 3 user stories that are easier, or the 1 user story that's more valuable but harder? Like that, you know, when these sprint plans come together and you have your points on them, this is where it gets hard, but hard from a business point of view. But in general, if you understand your user and you design things and you follow this process, you wind up with more successful products cheaper. And this will lead you to your minimum viable product, which is key, right? You want to build the simplest thing you can and prove that it works from a technology point of view. From a business point of view, I would want to focus your product and why you're different and how that helps your user, right? So that's what I said once again to Steve, like, what is your key feature? What makes your product different? How is that going to help your user? I want to prototype and test quickly. And I want to use the UX process, as I said, to engage with those customers and get them in the process. From development's point of view, there's always a hard part. And you want to find that hard part early, and you want to really make sure you've proved out that hard part. You really want to take UX very seriously. And if you do, and you understand those users, and I mean, sometimes actually have a particular user in your mind of, I am building this for someone, and that will help you visualize it. Proof of concept, we're big believers in proof of concepts, as many as you can, minimum viable product. And it doesn't stop when you finish your first product. That it's all about continual learning and continual updates. Get things out there and try. Now, in some businesses, you can't have a, you know, continual updates on a therapeutic or a medical device. But when you can, when you're building up, the way you build software products is you build them up in slices and make them more powerful. You don't try to jump to the end and be the coolest things in sliced bread, because you'll never get there. You want to build something and build it up as you go.
So we have 1 minute left.
Okay, I'm there. We want to understand who's your user and who your buyer is. Your buyer is often different from your user, and you want to understand what value you're giving to your buyer as well as to your user. Oh, there I go, and I'm at my last slide. Thank you very much. Good luck on your project. I'm Peter Winston. Here's my LinkedIn, email. Oh, I tweeted out about this presentation while we were on hold before. So I already sent a tweet out about eNet.